The door of the ward shut as Will went back inside. Nora could still vaguely hear the conversation. Lisa said, "Dad, Nora's—" "Don't speak her name. Remember how kind your mother was to her? She treated her like she was her own. But how's she any different to Henry now? She's holding on so stubbornly to that company and just standing by as your mother—" Irene said, "Don't say that about Nora. She's not doing anything because she knows it's useless, even if she lets go of the company. Don't vent your anger on the wrong person. It's not Nora's fault." Will faltered. "I know that, really, I do. But she makes me feel so awful when she acts like she doesn't care." He couldn't hold it in anymore and started to sob bitterly. Nora stayed outside. She could feel their helplessness and anger through the door. "Don't you feel bad?" Henry appeared behind her. "For the sake of a company, are you really going to disregard your aunt's life?" Their disputes had been loud, and they'd attracted a circle of onlookers. Nora ignored her father. She looked down at her phone and sent a text to Lisa, telling her to get ready as someone would be coming to operate on her aunt in a few days. After sending the message, she calmly turned to leave, squeezing her way through the crowd. As she left, she was watched by Justin, who was standing nearby with Lawrence. A relative had been hospitalized today, so he'd come to visit. He hadn't expected to encounter this situation. Lawrence said, "The Smiths are certainly shameless, but doesn't it seem odd for her to be so callous? Why doesn't she care?" Justin frowned and said, "Check if there's anything that can be done about her aunt's illness." With Justin's connections, it wasn't hard to find out what he wanted to know. By the time they were in the car and on the way back to the hotel, Lawrence already had an update for him. "Her condition is extremely difficult to operate on. There are only 2 experts in the States who can do it, but the success rate is only 50%. Coincidentally, both experts are currently employed in our hospitals." Justin didn't respond, so Lawrence couldn't help but continue. "If Miss Smith knows what she's doing, she'll use this as another opportunity to approach you." When the car arrived at Hotel Finest, Justin spotted Nora getting out of a cab. When she noticed their car, she stayed where she was instead of entering the hotel. Was she waiting for them? Nora was torn at the sight of Justin's car pulling up. She didn't know whether to say anything or not. "They got the wrong end of the stick this morning and thought I was pursuing him. If I go over now, they really will think I'm stalking him." But she couldn't help feeling uncomfortable when she thought of Mr. Hunt's son being used by his tutors, and him either not knowing or not caring. She lowered her head slightly and waited. From the corner of her eye, she kept track of Justin walking past her, surrounded by bodyguards. Impulsively, she spoke. "I have something to say, Mr. Hunt." Justin stopped and gazed at her. His exquisite features exuded aggression. "What can I do for you, Miss Smith?" In a deeper, more assertive voice than normal, Nora asked, "Did you do proper background checks on your son's tutors, Mr. Hunt?" She hadn't seen anything with her own eyes, only heard what the tutors had said in the elevator, and so she'd no way of judging whether or not their words were true. But she was too worried to let it go. Justin frowned. He didn't understand. Why is she keeping quiet about the doctors and talking about tutors? Is she too embarrassed, so she's decided to talk about something else first? Justin was a straightforward man, so he got straight to the point. "Do you need me to introduce Dr. Lane and Dr. Wright to you, Miss Smith? Do you want to speak to them?" Although Dr. Lane and Dr. Wright were the most famous neurosurgeons in the States, the likelihood of success would only be 50% if either of them operated on her aunt. Why would she go to them? Besides, she was talking about the tutors. Why was he bringing up doctors? If the tutors were really his son, then the responsibility would lie entirely on Justin. He must have been neglecting the child. Nora replied impatiently, "No, I don't. Please show some more concern toward your son." She left immediately. Justin was mystified as to why she seemed angry, as if it was her son they were discussing instead of his. He watched her leave, somewhat stunned, but quickly came back to his senses. Anger welled up inside of him, and he seemed colder than ever. Lawrence couldn't help himself. "I'd thought Miss Smith was so indifferent to her aunt because she was at her wit's end. I didn't expect she really was leaving her to... Her aunt has no chance without that surgery. If they went through with getting the operation, she'd at least have 50-50 odds. It's an obvious choice. Is that woman actually crazy and heartless enough to reject the one chance for her aunt's survival? You know what? Forget it. I don't have time for this. I obviously misjudged her. I never should have meddled in her business. What was I thinking? But still, Justin kept replaying their conversation in his head as he entered the elevator, trying to make sense of what had happened. Cherry stealthily crept up to the top floor. She was just about to enter the study of the Hunt suite when she turned and saw a stern-faced woman walking towards her with a ruler in her hand. The woman said viciously, "Where have you been? Why are you loitering about when you haven't finished your homework, Pete?" Cherry stared at her, outraged. She stood as tall as she could make herself and put her hands on her hips. She was about to hurl insults back at the tutor when the door opened. She turned to see her handsome father striding in. Cherry immediately forgot what had just happened. She went to leap forward towards him as if she had wings, but the tutor caught her by the arm. Justin took off his jacket. As per usual, the first thing he did was ask how his son was doing. "How's Pete been today?" The tutor sighed. "He's not done his homework again. Carrying on like this, he'll never understand the more complicated topics. He just refuses to listen to us. He's making no progress and is lagging a long way behind his cousins." Justin frowned at her troubling report. Although his son's IQ was excellent, he was introverted and autistic and had trouble expressing himself. He really didn't know how he should communicate with him. He walked up to Cherry, squatted down to face her, and asked patiently, "Why didn't you do your homework?" "Wow, looking at him up close, Daddy looks even more handsome." Cherry was so distracted that she didn't answer him immediately. Seeing the child silent, the tutor scoffed inwardly. She was more convinced than ever that he would never cry, make a fuss, or complain. Relieved, she started to spin more lies. "We're really at our wits' end, Mr. Hunt. Discipline and scolding don't work on him. Your only option now is to employ special methods for his education." This caught Cherry's attention. What does she mean? Special methods? Cherry pulled herself together and was just about to speak, but Justin frowned and asked the tutor what she had been thinking. What kind of special measures? The tutor sighed and replied, "Pete was born autistic. He doesn't like to talk, nor does he know how to communicate with others. If this goes on, it'll impede his development. I think you should consider either sending him to medical specialists for treatment or to a school for children with special needs." Her eyes shone after she spoke. If Pete was sent to a special needs school, he'd be diagnosed as having a severe learning disability. Then they'd be able to ruin his future, just as she'd been instructed to do. That tutor's horrible. Cherry remembered what had happened before her dad arrived. She looked at Justin. If Daddy agreed with what the woman was suggesting, she'd stop seeing him as a father and would get Mummy to save Pete from their clutches. She needn't have worried. Justin's expression instantly darkened. He retorted fiercely, "Pete is fine. He doesn't need to attend a school for children with special needs. If you can't teach him, then I'll find someone else." "Lawrence?" "Yes, sir." "Settle her wages immediately," Justin ordered. "She doesn't need to come in anymore." The tutor was shocked by his sudden anger. Justin was usually very polite to her, which had made her forget how domineering a man he really was. She had made a mistake. She shouldn't have pushed it so far, so suddenly. She should have taken it slow. Seeing that she was out of a job, she made a last-ditch attempt to complete her mission. Putting on a sincere, earnest expression, she said, "I am the top domestic tutor in the state, Mr. Hunt. My advice is undoubtedly in your son's best interest. But since you refuse to listen to the truth, then forget I said anything. I enjoyed myself very much during my time with Pete. Goodbye." Her speech was what an exemplary tutor would be expected to say. Justin's anger faded a little, and he said, "Give her an extra 6 months' wages." The tutor was ecstatic. 6 months' wages was a lot of money, especially added to what the old lady had given her. Cherry, who was listening to them intently, was pleased. Daddy hadn't given up on Pete. He cared and was protective of him. It was just that he had been deceived by that wicked tutor, As she watched her walk happily toward the door, Cherry's quick mind sprang into action. Her big eyes stared up at Justin innocently, and she asked him, "Daddy, am I a little bird without a mother?" Justin was taken aback. He looked down at the child who was gazing up at him so trustingly. The young, innocent voice made what the child said next sound particularly heartbreaking. "Is it Mummy's fault that I'm not as smart as Daddy?" Justin was shocked. His son rarely spoke this much, and he didn't understand where these troubling questions were coming from. He restrained his fury and asked gently, "Who told you these things, Pete?" Cherry stretched out her arm and pointed her chubby little finger at the door. She did. At the door, the tutor's legs turned to jelly the instant she heard the accusation. She could feel Justin's anger and said fearfully, "Stop spouting nonsense, Pete." Cherry hid behind Justin and hugged his leg. The tutor looked at her in surprise. Is that really the who doesn't talk? Seeing how fearful his son looked, Justin didn't give the tutor a chance to explain any further. He ordered, "Take her out, Lawrence." "Yes, sir." Justin rubbed Cherry on the head comfortingly and said, "Can you play by yourself for a while, Pete?" He knew what was about to happen would not be suitable for children. Cherry wanted to stay with her father, but she knew he needed to deal with the tutor first. It was just like how Mummy had sometimes blindfolded her and told her to count sheep when she'd gone into fights when they'd been living abroad. She nodded, "Okay, Daddy." Justin only left the room after seeing Cherry pick up a toy car. Lawrence was an efficient man. He'd already got the truth out of the tutor. He explained what she'd told him. "It's your uncle and his family that bribed them. They want to make Pete into a stubborn, problematic child so that their own children can take over the corporation. The 2 tutors were sent by your grandmother, which explains why we didn't vet them properly. We didn't suspect a thing. We won't be so negligent next time." "But Grandma loves Pete more than anyone. How could she?" Justin clenched his fists and asked, "What did they do to Pete?" Lawrence looked at the floor. They didn't teach him properly, and most of what they did teach him was wrong. Justin looked at the trembling woman and headed for her. He hissed, "You'll never work with children again. You hear me? You're done." Lawrence's heart trembled at Justin's temper, but he too was furious at what these people had done to Pete. Justin had always loved and doted on his son. It was just that his way of expressing it was sometimes a little off the mark. Justin returned to the room. When he saw the child he thought to be his son on the sofa playing with the toy car, his heart tightened with guilt. Pete had been with Justin since he'd been a baby. He'd done everything for him. Cared for him, nursed him, changed his diapers, everything a father should. But Pete hadn't started to talk. When they'd seen a doctor about it, Justin was told that Pete had autism. Grandma had said that it must be because the boy didn't have a mother and so had no sense of security. She'd said that the boy shouldn't be looked after by just one man anymore. She'd arranged for babysitters, family doctors, and tutors for him. As Pete slowly grew older, he was able to start having short conversations with people. This had convinced Justin that his grandmother had been right, so he trusted her suggestions from then on. Pete was a stubborn boy, and he and Justin were often at loggerheads. He had continued to think that this was a phase that all normal children went through. That was, until the incident last week. It's all my fault. Justin walked over and sat beside Cherry. He softened his voice and said, "Daddy is sorry, Pete." Cherry stretched out her little arms and hugged him. "Everything will be fine, Daddy. Thanks for saying sorry. Can we start again and be different now?" Justin sighed. Then he said seriously, "We won't engage any more tutors. I'll be teaching you from now on. We'll get started right now. How about that?" Cherry was taken aback. She hated having to do homework. Help, Pete. When Nora returned to the room, she found a child she thought to be her daughter sitting on the sofa and waiting for her obediently, instead of playing games on her phone like she usually did. She walked over and kissed the child on the forehead. "He's so well behaved today, baby." The soft lips pressing against his skin caused Pete to freeze. He was still not used to the closeness. "Mummy's so soft and gentle." He stared at her longingly, and then noticed her looking at him with a half-amused smile. "Are you intending to take a bath with me, Cherry?" Only then did Pete realize with a start that he'd been so lost in his daydreaming that he'd gotten up and followed her to the bathroom. He was about to leave, but Nora stooped over and picked him up. She said, "Forget it. Let's give you a bath first." Alarm bells rang in Pete's head. If she bathed him, she'd definitely find out he was a boy and not Cherry after all. His identity would be revealed.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.